ready, you tell me. Hey guys, lot going on today, a lot of people here. First I wanted to announce some business, and that is there are 2 buckets up there. And one of those buckets is for Sonny's to donate to them because they're always so good to us. And the other bucket is to help Melvin out a little bit. She's been our server all year, and she gets paid a flat fee of $30 every week, which doesn't sound much. She gets to set up here and take down, gets to 30, and she also gets to do all her normal weight training. We don't really impede that, so she's fairly treated, but not overabundantly treated. So if you can donate to her today, that'd be great.
So I think a lot of people put in the buckets before we knew that.
Right.
So I don't know how you can sort that out.
Got a good, say a prayer, got any good ideas?
Well, you can leave it as it is, I mean, but that
No, we don't.
Dig in again. Yeah, you know what you put in. We're all honest here, right?
Right, there you go. And by the way, we thought we weren't gonna have fuel next week, but enough people said they wanted to, that we are gonna have fuel. It may not be in the same format as normal, but there will be fuel, there will be food, somebody will be here to speak to you, et cetera, et cetera. With that said, I'd like to introduce Major Go ahead.
Phil, you got the cards going around. Did you mention the
Yeah,
cards?
thank you. There's 2 cards going around. One is for the Sonny's crew, and one is for Melva. If you sign them both before you get out of here, I'd sure appreciate it. And with that, I'd like to introduce retired Major Bill Adams. You got the email, I'm sure, but he is a 1981 graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point.
What?
Sorry,
excuse me, that was who?
He normally comes to talk to us about Israel. He is the national field spokesman for Bridges for Peace. But today he's taking a little different tack. He's talking to us about duty, honor, and country, and the Army-Navy game, I guess.
Yeah. Come on. This Saturday is the American Classic. It's the ultimate college rivalry, Army-Navy, and we need to settle something right away. It doesn't matter if you're Air Force or Coast Guard or something leaning that direction. It doesn't matter if you're a confirmed civilian, never been around the military. You have to decide right now, are you a go Army or a go Navy, all right? Everybody ready? You got your vote? We're going to defer to our Navy friends first. On the count of 3, I want to hear a go Navy from that side. 1, 2, 3.
Go Navy!
Wow, that was strong. That was strong. Army men, you know what's necessary. I want to hear a go Army. 1, 2, 3. Go Army! Excellent. I think it sounds pretty tough. Yeah. Army needs all the go Armies it can get right now because it's got a little bit of a struggling season going on. Navy is favored in this game, but as you know, when it gets on that gridiron, it's a brand new game, and these guys are just going to be scrapping it out for 4 quarters. And somebody might even use the forward pass. They like the ground game so much. The first forward pass in football was against Army by Notre Dame. You know, some guy decides to throw it forward, and of course Army says, wait a minute, that's not in the books. And the refs look and say, well, it's not in the book, so I guess we can do it. So overall, Navy has got 60 games won against Army. Army 52. So again, we need some strong go Armies to get that up. That's because our Navy had that 14-game winning streak, which right now was taken away from them by Army, who has a 3-game winning streak right now. So Army needs its 4th win in the streak. Navy is trying to come back and beat Army this year. So again, let's hear it again. We need to go Army right now. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Go Army! We will forget the Navy part. My first Army-Navy game was in December of 1977. Was anybody here alive then? Some of you. All right. And the snow was falling in Philadelphia. You know, West Point is upstate New York. Annapolis is in Maryland, but the game is fought in Philadelphia, sort of neutral territory.
Not lately.
Credit to the Navy on this one, and this is the nature of the fight. Navy could have won the game, I'm sorry, they could have tied the game in the last second with a field goal. You know, assuming the kicker put it through the uprights. But tying is not what you're after in the Army-Navy game, you're after the win. So Navy passed to the end zone for the touchdown. My roommate broke up the pass and was the hero of the Army team. And it was that close. And I was a plebe. You know, when you're a plebe at West Point, you're lower than anything. And that was a good year, because when Army beats Navy, then that's a good, at least a few days that are good for the plebes. The upperclassmen go a little bit easier on you. My latest experience with Army football, which I haven't had a whole lot over the centuries since then, is just about a month ago. Army beat University of Massachusetts 63-7. So they just haven't been doing much of that the whole season. Maybe it's something about UMass's defense. But we'll look for a great game on Saturday. And again, I trust you'll cheer for Navy or Army as the Spirit leads you. Go Army.
By the Spirit, I love it.
But the Academy, I'll have my helper hold my notes. The Academy system is built on these three words that you heard Bill say. Who knows them with me? Duty, honor, country. Those three hallowed words, right? We had to memorize. Your name again is
Ed.
Ed's a West Point grad. Anybody else in here West Point? How about Navy grad? Okay, yeah, of course.
Wow.
My good friend. We love each other in spite of this difference.
We had Bill over for many of the 13 games. For the last three, my wife says, "Hal, don't you feel sorry for Bill yet?" No, not yet.
She started rooting for the Army during that Navy winning streak. General MacArthur. We all should be standing at attention when we hear that name, but we don't have to. General MacArthur delivered the famous, the classic duty, honor, country speech as he was waning in years, and he was, or was that waxing in years? Anyway, he's getting older. And he received an award back at the Academy where he'd been a cadet, where he'd been a professor, where he'd been the superintendent, and now back to receive the Thayer Award. And he said these words: duty, honor, country. Those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be. They are your rallying points to build courage when courage seems to fail, to regain faith when there seems to be little cause for faith, to create hope when hope becomes forlorn. Reading from the book I was handed the day I entered the Academy, Buell Notes, you're supposed to memorize great quantities of this book, and I should have been giving you that from memory, but memories fade. My path to get there, though, just very quickly, sometimes people have said to me, "You must be so smart to have gotten to West Point or to have graduated." I say, no, because I didn't have much competition. I was a Virgin Islands kid, and nobody is foolish enough to leave the Virgin Islands and go to Hades, you know what I mean? It's just the contrast is too great. So here I was, wanting to go to the Air Force Academy. I was all about flying and stuff, till I realized I didn't have the eyes. Plus, a guy goes to each academy for the first time in Virgin Islands history, and it's a quota system by your congressional thing. So the door was closed for 4 years. You know, nobody else from the islands could go to any of the academies as long as somebody was there. The guy at West Point couldn't take it, and he quit. And that's why the door opened for me to go to West Point. And my competition was zero. That's just helpful for somebody like me. Was I qualified? Yes. And any young man or woman that you know and you want to encourage them to be well-rounded in academics, yes, athletics, yes, and leadership. And then you got to be, you know, basically healthy, physically fit, along with the athletics. So with anybody having those three aspects of their life and do them the best they can be competitive and get a slot at an academy, or similarly ROTC scholarships. Same standards in effect. So I encourage you that way. But mine ended up going out. Okay, I was going to go to Air Force ROTC scholarship at Georgia Tech and be a rambling wreck. Until the appointment came through from West Point. I was not going to take it because I was actually two things. I did not want to be in the Army, and I was scared of West Point. Anything I heard about it, the pictures, you know, so that place is too mean. I better just go Air Force where it's friendly, you know, blue skies and all that. I went out running. I did not know the Lord Jesus Christ in my life at that time. I had some idea of who he was, but I didn't know him. I went out running just to think about it, and I came back and knew my complete change of mind. I knew I was to go to West Point, and I had a month I would have to show up because you start there in early July. This was at the very end of high school. And so I told my mother, I think I'm going to go, and she started crying, and you know how mothers are. And suddenly I realized I'm sort of embarking on something kind of big here. And I looked back and I realized I didn't know I was praying what I was. In other words, I know God works with us in our weakness. I didn't yet even know who he was. I didn't know his lordship, but I know that he was directing my life and redirecting me to this academy, which of course is full of tough training, high standards, military discipline, piled on top of military discipline, basic combat skills, rigorous physical training, mental strain, emotional strain, and the honor system. The honor code says a cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate anybody who does, those who do. And so, I didn't even mention the biggest challenge to me was, remember I told you I wasn't the sharpest tool in the academic shed? Academics, or I don't know, they design the academics for people that can, I guess, take in this fire hose of information and retain it somehow, and regurgitate it on a test. I was struggling, but by God's grace, I made it. One of my inspirations at the academy, and I trust you each have somebody, a man in your life who has inspired you, and one of them for me was Major Lloyd. Our tactical officer was Major Herbert Lloyd. At that time, as a major in the Army, he ended up a general, but he had a chest full of medals, so going up so high in his dress uniform, you couldn't see what his top awards were. They were behind the lapel. He was known as being the most decorated man of his rank in the military or the Army at the time. And this was the most dynamic individual I think you could ever possibly meet. He's an Arkansas man, complete soldier. He had served 3 tours in Vietnam. First time drafted, second 2 volunteered and became an officer in the process. He loved soldiers and he loved cadets, and he told us all kinds of things, but let me just tell you 2 things that Major Lloyd taught us. He said, regarding the honor system, you know, we just quoted to you, cadets won't lie, steal, cheat. He said, if you mess up, men, take your hits and press on. You have to hear that with a tomahawk chop hand and the sternest face and the Arkansas accent. Take your hits and press on. It says, you know, don't be making excuses for anything in your life, right? Just if you mess up, just tell somebody right away. Take your hits and then press on. And then he would tell us things like, don't wait till you're on a battlefield and your guts are hanging out and you start crying for your mama because you don't know anybody better to call on. And that's who you'll call for, he told us. If you're on a battlefield with your guts hanging out, you'll cry for mama. He said, don't wait till that's happening to try to get right with God. He said, get up to chapel now. Boy, I want to see you in chapel on Sunday. Separation of church and state. You know. U.S. government, you know, institution, your tax dollars were helping to train us to get on up to chapel on Sunday. It used to be mandatory at West Point. It just reflects that that's always been a bedrock value, spiritual health and well-being of our military. Plus, there's life and death issues involved. And so we had to address those. And he wouldn't mince words on that kind of thing. And one time, one of our guys was nodding off. Is anybody here nodding off? I could use you as an example. Oh, you don't nod off when Major Lloyd is talking to you. You can imagine. He just suddenly turned beet red. None of us quite knew what happened, but he's just looking back into our little crowd, and he just starts doing the tomahawk thing, and he just starts shaking, and he starts saying, "You're spitting on their graves. You're spitting on their graves." Of course, we had no idea what's going on. Terror is just entering our hearts. Well, what was he talking about? The boys that fought and died alongside him, they served with honor, and they were buried with honor, and you could fall asleep while he's telling you about honor. You're spitting on their graves. You can only imagine the influence of a man like that on a young, impressionable cadet. I thank God for Major, and now passed away, but Major General Herbert Lloyd.
Right.
Hey, Christmas release, you finally get to go home because you're there, all semester, no freedom. Go home to the Virgin Islands, big mistake, because I had to come back. I hit the low point of life. Terrible to return to the dark, freezing, snowy cold of the Hudson River Valley, upstate New York. Unbelievable winds howling down through. And my very first return early morning class was survival swimming. And I rushed from survival swimming, still wet, out into the cold, across campus to calculus class. It was just the low point of my life. But what was happening was I was beginning to recognize that something about me wasn't right. I was the all-American kid at this point. Now, think about it, I'm doing all these. I was a scout, I was Civil Air Patrol, I was doing good things. I was going to our nation's military academy. And yet I started to realize something is really dark. And the darkness of the environment, the oppressiveness of all the regimen I'm under, maybe contributed to me seeing there is something really deficient in my life, and I think it's more inside than outside. And I started to pray. It's really funny because I didn't know how to pray. I just found myself praying, and this was my prayer. You have to stand at attention a lot. You're in formations, you're waiting to sit down at the mess hall, and everybody, 4,000 cadets are in there like this. And I found that I started to say, Lord, I want to know you better. And it's kind of interesting because I didn't really know, later on I could realize I didn't really even know the Lord, but I thought I had an awareness of something about God. I want to know you better was my prayer over and over. Do you think he was hearing that prayer?
Yes.
Do you think he was even behind that prayer, prompting it? Yeah. And I hope you know that in your own life, wherever you're at, that God is fully capable of awakening you, of stirring you, of drawing you to himself, even giving you a prayer when you don't know how to pray. Let's do a time check, because we're going to be out of here at quarter till
32.
We're doing great. Okay. I mentioned the mess hall, which is quite an experience of its own. The plebes, the first year guys, sit at a table of 10. They're the three at one end, and they've each got duties. There's the cold beverage corporal. He has to know what everybody's cold beverage preference is and serve that up properly. There's the hot beverage corporal, same thing with the hot. Then there's the poor slob who has to cut the dessert. And he has to cut it in equal portions of how many want the dessert. Can you imagine cutting an odd number of pie pieces? So more than a few, apple pies were turned into apple cobbler by the time it was done. Just go ahead and mix it up and then announce that the apple cobbler is served. But tell you what, I made it through that first year and then entered the best summer of your life. That's what they call your second summer there. First summer is all your basic skills training, learning how to be a cadet and learning basic Army combat skills. Now you're going to have advanced skills in your second summer, plus some free time out at Camp Buckner and Lake Popalopan. There's going to be Kool-Aid on the tables. There's going to be some parties that could happen now and then. There's going to be a little bit of fun in the midst of very rigorous training. They call it the best summer of your life. Do you guess it was for me? You're right. Because as the summer started off, my company commander, who's a cadet senior, just finished junior year, he's going to be a senior now. He gives his pep talk. You know how these Army pep talks are. The standards will be high and all of that and so forth. He says, and there's something I want available for this company as a Bible study. It'll meet out back at the barracks every Tuesday night. You can be there if you want to be. I suggest you consider it. Yeah. Here's church and state again. And my heart was ready. Remember, I'd been praying, Lord, I want to know you better. Maybe that's how I'll know him better. And when I went into that little circle of cadets, I was struck with something. As they talked about Jesus, they talked like they knew him. And as they prayed, they talked like they were talking to him because they were. And I didn't have that experience. I started investigating. There's also chapel that goes on there out on the point on Lake Popalopan, Chaplain Camp. You might know Dick Camp. I talked to him one night after chapel. He recognized that I didn't know what I was talking about and gave me a booklet called Becoming a Christian. What do you think I did with it? I was insulted. Remember, I grew up a Christian, nominally, I just didn't know the Lord. And so I stuck the booklet in the top of my wall locker in the barracks, and it was tucked way to the back. There's a kind of upper compartment. I stuck it way to the back, and there it was. And a week or two later, when I opened up my wall locker door, which you do, multiple times through the day to get uniforms in and out, whatever's going on, that booklet fell out to my feet. I had no accounting for that. What do you think? It seems like God wanted me to read this. So I reluctantly read it. I went out on a rock alone on the edge of Lake Popolopin, and I read, and I'm actually reading it going, I know that, Jesus, Lord, died for my sins, so forth. But I didn't know that I needed to go ahead and humble myself and ask Him to come into my life, be the Lord of my life. Transformative moment, right there on the rock. And I was a secret agent Christian for the next 6 months or so, because I was afraid that anybody knowing this could think that I was kind of weak or soft now, Even though I had seen the manliness and strength in the guys around me who were, talking to Jesus like they knew Him. But we're just a little bit stupid in life, and these things can take time. I was introduced into fellowship. So important. There was chapel every morning in a lecture hall. Turns out chapel was a great alternative to being out in the snow in formation.
There you go. Now you get it on.
And chapel was alive. Listen, really, God was moving at West Point, at all the academies, through our military. There's a strong testimony. So many people have been praying. There's been ministries focused and sowing into our military. I know some of you here have been part of that in some way. Be a part of it, because many young men and women are finding Jesus, and they need discipleship. And my discipleship was now beginning. And some of the young men and women I began to meet through fellowship were just outstanding influences in my life. I want to give particular honor and recognition to Carl Reed. Carl didn't know he was becoming my discipler. By the way, I prefer that term over mentor. I know we use mentor for everything now. Mentor, a Greek god. Okay, fine. How about a disciple maker like Jesus talked about? Make disciples. Carl Reed was a disciple maker by allowing me to be his friend and watch him. He was teaching me things. Yeah, he told me scriptures to memorize, but it was the idea of following somebody who's following Jesus. I got the chance to give that a try myself. So I honor my great friend, Carl Reed, who was the best man at my wedding, and it took him 15 years later to get a wife, and I was the best man at his wedding. At the Air Force Academy, if you can believe it. Matthew 11:28 and through 30. Come to me, Jesus says, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Remember that turmoil I was having, the darkness I was engulfed in? Yeah, very hard circumstances of life, but the inner struggle of recognizing that I'm a sinner is what it translates to. Sinner, and I need salvation, not just mental assent, but I need the lordship of the Savior.
Amen.
I was heavy burdened. He gave me rest. Take my yoke upon you, he says, and learn from me. And I did. And through a guy like Carl and other examples, I was able to learn from him. For I am gentle and lowly in heart, he says, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden, he says, is light. Very good. So I moved out of that secret agent Christian phase into a disciple of Jesus. And next thing you know, I couldn't help it. He was calling me into leadership. I was leading a Bible study right in our cadet company, probably long before I had any business leading a Bible study. But it was leadership training in the spiritual as well as the natural realm that he was giving me, and I ended up in ministry long term. I didn't become a chaplain in the Army, by the way. I served as a chaplain in Christian Care Ministry with colleagues like these right here. I served Bridges for Peace with colleagues like these, where we're Israel outreaching. In fact, I want to offer you to connect today, quick commercial moment. I want to offer you to connect to Israel through Bridges for Peace. Jack, right there, has these cards, so don't be shy. If you want to say, yeah, I'm not connected to Israel, I ought to be, that's a great way to do it. So that's the work I get to do. But in the Army, I was a field artillery officer. I was big cannons and missiles. How about yourself? What?
Signal Corps.
Signal Corps, keeping all the signals going. And you were subs, I know that. So there's just a myriad of things to do out there to keep our nation safe. And we honor our chaplains who serve the spiritual needs of our troops. But that wasn't me. I was really bent on being an officer, a combat arms officer who is a Christian, rather than the chaplain who has to be a Christian, or a Jew, or a Muslim, or whatever he or she is. But what I'm saying is I didn't want to be a religious man, but I found out I was called ultimately to religious, or more specifically, biblical spiritual leadership in lives. And there you have it. That's what I get to do today. After blowing things up, I get to now put some things together. Let me read you a few words from General MacArthur in that same duty, honor, country speech. And now how's our time?
12:41.
6 minutes to go. Are we okay? All right. Plus, you can't say no to General MacArthur. He got in trouble by trying to say no to President Truman. He overstepped his authority there. But hey, let's go back to his speech.
He was right.
I got to travel and sing with the Cadet Glee Club, by the way. Quite an honor to sing with something like that. And he makes reference here. He says, as I listened to those songs of the Glee Club, in memory's eye I could see those staggering columns of the First World War, bending under soggy packs, on many a weary march from dripping dusk to drizzling dawn, slogging ankle deep through the mire of shell-shocked roads, to form grimly for the attack, blue-lipped, covered with sludge and mud, chilled by the wind and rain, driving home to their objective, and for many, to the judgment seat of God. I do not know the dignity of their birth, but I do know the glory of their death. They died unquestioning, uncomplaining, with faith in their hearts and on their lips, the hope that we would go on to victory. Always for them, duty, honor, country. Always their blood and sweat and tears as we sought the way and the light and the truth. He goes on to say, the soldier above all other men is required to practice the greatest act of religious training, sacrifice. In battle and in the face of danger and death, he discloses those divine attributes which his Maker gave when he created man in his own image. No physical courage and no brute instinct can take the place of the divine help, which alone can sustain him, however horrible the incidents of war may be. The soldier who is called upon to offer and to give his life for his country is the noblest development of mankind. So one of my struggles, which should be a struggle, I believe, for any man of God, is, can I be part of killing? And ultimately, that's what a military does. There's a lot of other, amazing aid and help to building up peoples and protecting and feeding and defending them. That's even more what the military does, but ultimately a military has to kill. And I was able to resolve through the example of others and through words like these. I was able to resolve through the story of the centurion in the Bible, the Roman soldier who comes to Jesus, and Jesus marvels at what about this man? He recognizes authority. He has those under him, but he's under authority himself. And Jesus says, I haven't seen as great a faith in Israel. In other words, among my fellow Jews, I haven't seen. So he commends the faith of a soldier and tells him to lead his soldiers well. He doesn't just tell him, you better stop being a soldier. So it was those struggles that are necessary struggles to resolve that, yes, I could be a soldier and I'll be part of what has to sometimes kill. But that won't ever be the glory. That's not the glory. It's the sacrifice. That's where the honor is. It's never anybody who rejoices in the killing. There's something wrong with them. I had leaders, I had sergeants from Vietnam and so forth, training me, telling me, "Don't you be so happy or glad just because in your little training exercise you defeated the other side." He said, "That's not what we're here for. We're here to stop fighting and war so we can have peace." And so there's incredible standards of sacrifice and service, duty, honor. Country, far from perfect, fallen humans just like me that are trying to carry out those difficult missions. But I do want to honor my parents, those that have influenced my life, military leaders, spiritual leaders, chaplains, and leaders of Christian ministries I've gotten to be a part of, missions that set a standard of duty. It doesn't have to be just because you got it drilled into you at West Point. Say that with me again. Duty, honor, country. Those three hallowed words, as the general said. And the general gave this speech off the cuff. Incredible words. He even says in his speech, I'm not a man of great diction and elocution or whatever. He used words like that, saying I can't speak that well. Well, then he closed with words like this: the shadows are lengthening for me. The twilight is here. My days of old have vanished tone and tint. They have gone glimmering through the dreams of things that were. Their memory is one of wondrous beauty, watered by tears and coaxed and caressed by the smiles of yesterday. I listen vainly for the witching melody of faint bugles blowing, reveille of far drums beating the long roll in my dreams. I hear again the crash of guns, the rattle of musketry, the strange, mournful mutter of the battlefield. He says, but in the evening of my memory, always I come back to West Point. Always there echoes and re-echoes those words. Say them with me again. Duty, honor, country. And I commend that to you. But above all the lofty concepts of sacrifice and duty and honor and country, there's that call of God for each life to completely conform to the sacrifice of Jesus, is the only penalty, way of addressing the penalty of our darkness, that sin which completely separates us from God. He calls us out of that darkness and into his marvelous light that was accomplished because the Son of God gave his life willingly. He's the ultimate duty, honor, and his country is his kingdom, and that's what we're called to live in and prosper. So let me pray that for you. Lord, I thank you for these men who are listening, and men that desire to serve you with a whole heart. For any man that doesn't yet have that awareness that Jesus is Lord, not only generally, but Lord of his own very heart. I pray that transformation would be swift now, and that he'd yield and let you be that glorious Lord who gets all the glory and honor, for we give it to you now. In Jesus' name. And can we close out with one more? Go Army, beat Navy. Come on, let me hear it.
Go Army! Beat Navy! Yeah.
From the Navy we hear.
Go Navy!
Have a great game on Saturday. God bless you.